distance is fine. I know you can't care, and nothing is big like that. You don't see me now, I don't see you back. So everybody, hi. Paul's going to be joining us virtually in a second, the writer, director, producer of the film. So stay, so you can tell Paul how great his movie is. Are we ready? Hey, Paul. It's Melissa. Can you see
Hi
me?
there. I can.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your movie. Everybody, what do you think of Paul's movie?
Oh, wow.
I told you you'd have a good audience here.
Yeah, I never know what to expect. But thank you so much, Melissa. Thanks so much for everybody at Athena for screening the movie. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the audience for being there.
I can't hear him so well. Michael?
Oh, should I speak louder?
Yeah. Or put headphones on.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah, perfect. So what did you say? Your last
Oh,
thing?
I just said thank you.
Oh, okay.
I just said thank you so much to you and to Athena for having me, and thank you so much to the audience for being here.
Well, Paul and I have had like a correspondence for the last couple of years, and I just think his work is so good. And so, Paul, I have a couple questions for you, and then audience members are going to ask some questions. So I was reading the press notes about the film, and you wrote that you write films for specific actors, like that's your thing. Can you talk a little bit about why that is your writing methodology?
Yeah, well, sometimes they don't want to do the movie after you've written for them. I just had that happen recently. But then you have to switch it up pretty rapidly. But I think I remember things on an oral level. Like I when I remember something, I think of how somebody talks as opposed to what kind of what they look like. And I started out as a playwright, so maybe that's part of it. But I do tend to get people's voices stuck in my head. And this is the third film I've done with Lily Tomlin. And I certainly wouldn't have written the prior movie, Grandma, without having met Lily. Yeah, I find it helps to make something specific. And I'd met Jane Fonda, so likewise, in this case, Lily called me up and said that why don't I write something for her and Jane, and so then I just did.
How long did it take between her calling you up and you having the script done?
Well, she called me and then I didn't think about it for about 3 years. And then I thought of this idea of somebody at a funeral going up to a man and saying, now I'm going to kill you now that my friend is dead. I'm going to do it this weekend. And for some reason, I thought of Jane saying that, maybe because she's a very forceful person and very determined. And once I thought of that idea and coupled it with remembering that Lily said to write something, it was pretty rapid. I wrote it really fast.
Wow. Talk about the title, Moving On. Like, how did you get to that?
Titles are so hard. They're almost as hard as names for characters. Whenever I'm writing a name of a character, I'm like, this person never existed. There's no Mike out there who's but I thought of it in terms of overlapping sort of death with when it's possible to move on in life and the things that prevent one from moving on or growing. So those are the things that I was thinking of.
And so Grandma was a film where Lily takes her granddaughter to get an abortion, and this is a film about a woman dealing with trauma and her rape. You like really are good at writing stuff about women and trauma and things like, important issues. There are not a lot of a lot of guys who can do it in the way that you can. Why do you think that you are able to do that in a way that feels, I don't know, kind of special?
Well, I'm very grateful that you said that. I don't know if I'm good at it, uh, but I think first off that these are things that happen. It, People have crimes committed against them, and it makes it impossible for them to have the life that they would have otherwise had. And also, honestly, I do like writing things that are about women of a certain age that encompass the reality and history of feminism and gay history. Um, in that, for instance, in this movie, there's a whole subplot with Lily and this kid. And also, Lily spends a lot of time uh, with Malcolm's grandkids, and it appears to be like like someone who's really wonderful with kids. And the reason that I realized that the reason I put that in was that at Lily's age, if she was younger and nowadays it would be much easier for her to marry a woman and have kids and then have grandkids if she chose. But at the time when she was coming of age, that wasn't so much of an option. So along with sort of the trauma that Jane had gone through, I was also thinking about sort of the way that history funnels you into certain decisions or the lack thereof. I don't know. And some of it is honestly just having been around women who made a big impact on me, not only my mother, but like her oldest friend is a woman named Lauren O'Brien, who was a bass player, who was the first woman hired on a permanent basis by the New York Philharmonic. She was hired by Leonard Bernstein, and she's still a big figure in my life. But I remember how important it was for me as a kid to hang around with her.
Turns out that your mom and Jane were in school together?
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they were Hollywood brats. Yeah, yeah.
And your grandmother on your maternal paternal side was also an actor.
Yeah, my grandmother, my mother's mother was an actor named Lupita Tovar, and she starred in the first talking picture made in Mexico called Santa, which is a really great film. It's about somebody being forced into prostitution, actually. And she also starred in the Spanish language Dracula, which was filmed at night by Spanish speaking actors on the same sets, literally, as the American Dracula with Bela Lugosi. And she was a really powerful woman. She was sending money home to her family in Mexico, and her nickname there was the General, although she always said she was a witch.
So your family is clearly in the business, and you and your brother have done a lot of work together and still work together. How do you guys decide which are the things you're going to do together and which are the things you're like, I'm going off on my own?
Well, it's pretty rare that he wants to do something that I want to do. He'll give me notes, but it's never really an issue because we tend to be interested in different things.
Okay. But you're collaborating on some stuff now too?
We are, yeah. We're adapting a series of sci-fi novellas called The Murder Diaries by an author named Martha Wells, and she's a really amazing author.
So, the scene where Lily talks to Malcolm about the rape and how she sees it and how he sees it, and about consent and all these kinds of things that are so, so top of the mind now, and just like his vision of it is like so far away from her vision of how it is. That scene, could you talk a little bit about how you guys did that? And it must have been a tough one? How long did it take? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, with that kind of scene, I mean, I just wanted to give the ball to Jane. Um, and I mean, she was summing up, I think, things that she dealt with in life. And I mean, all I wanted to do was, now that I'd done a movie where that was sort of the nuclear generator of the movie, I didn't want to, I didn't want to take away the ability of her to say what happened in the script. Um, i in other words, like, I didn't want to water it down. It's a very violent description, and that's because that's what happened. Um, and it's interesting because I think on some level, I don't know for her character what would have happened if he had admitted to it earlier in the story. Like, he keeps lying about it and lying to himself, I assume. Uh, but somewhere embedded in there for him is he knows what happened. Um, and uh, basically, when it got to that day, Jane was uh, um, she wasn't very keen to like hang out with Malcolm. I mean, she wasn't keen to hang out with Malcolm before filming in the first place because she wanted to have the image of him in Clockwork Orange stuck in her head, and she didn't want to. You know, Malcolm was a likable,
Clockwork
sweet
Orange, is
guy.
that what you said? She wanted to
Yeah,
envision it. Okay.
yeah, she had that image of Malcolm uh, from when she saw that movie 50 years ago, and she wanted to hold on to that. And then I remember when we were rehearsing it, yeah, like when she slams the pillow down in his face, I think she almost broke his nose. And um, and then it was one of the rehearsals. Lily actually, I think, spat on Malcolm. Um, and so Malcolm was he was going through it while shooting that. And all Jane said to me, I think, really with that sort of thing is, in terms of the directing of it, you want to make sure that you're in the right camera position when she's doing it. So I I prefer to discuss with the actor what the shots are going to be, and then if Jane has said to me, I want to work up to this, I'd rather you start wide and then come in to what you're actually going to use. I would have done that, but to the contrary, and this is what I prefer too. We started on the close-ups that would be used, and she said, "I've only got a couple of these in me, so please let's make sure that you're in the shot that you want." Um, and there's sort of a myth, I think, with filmmaking that you should start wide and then get closer and closer, but I think sometimes that dissipates the energy of the actors. So yeah, Jane did it a couple of times, and then I said, "Okay, great, we have it," and then we got all the rest of the shots for the scene.
Wow, that's great. Does anyone have any questions for Paul? Come to the microphone so he could hear you. Well, I guess everybody is like, they don't have any questions, but I had one more about Jane's look. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
Lily looked like Lily, and Jane didn't look like Jane. How did you decide on the gray hair and the big glasses and all that?
It was a big thing for Jane getting the look right. So basically, um, a few months ahead of shooting, she started to try on different costumes and different wigs. And then she sent me something and says, "I think this is what she looks like." And I really loved it. Probably even if I hadn't loved it, I would have said, "Yeah, that's great. If that's that's what makes you feel the character." But I did really like it. And then the only sort of thing for me was I was very keen to have her coat in the beginning to look kind of like a gunslinger, or like Clint Eastwood in The Man with No Name. It looks like sort of a Western hero's coat to me. It's sort of cowboy length. And I was a little bit thinking of this as a Western, in the mishmash of tones that this movie is. I was thinking of it as somebody coming to town to avenge a crime.
That's great. And Richard Roundtree, I mean, like, well, what a guy. How did that come about?
I was trying to think of people who it would have been interesting in the 70s to see Jane play opposite, to have a romance opposite. And so I thought of Richard, who's, obviously his most famous thing was Shaft, but he's been in a lot of things and is still acting fairly consistently now. So I watched some of his current stuff, and then I called him up and said, "Hey, would you be up for doing this?" And he said, "Opposite Jane Fonda, yeah, absolutely." So he identified with it on some level. And I mean, I love his character's kindness. I love that he doesn't force her to tell him what happened in that scene. That he just says, "I'm sorry," which is about all one can say. So yeah, he had a really lovely quality.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, you have to come to the mic, or we'll bring it to you. Okay, we got an audience question. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. I just, as long as you're asking about the coat, I was just really puzzled by the scarf that Jane wore. It was like, what is the significance? Is this like lavender left or with all the colors, or I don't know. Just, can you speak about the scarf?
You heard the
Sure.
question?
Yeah, I heard the question is about the scarf. Why that scarf? To be 100% honest, you probably have to ask Jane. I think she felt that character, coming from, in her mind, Cleveland, would have a nice sort of attempt at colorfulness. Yeah, it's a little bit of a strange combination of colors. But I liked the juxtaposition of that with her more severe look. But I'll ask her. Sorry, it's not going to be of any help to you. But,
And the movie's opening really soon, like next week or the week after.
yeah, March 17th.
Yeah, so tell all your friends, and you saw it here first at Athena. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Melissa. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
What'd you just say?
I
and
just
he's
said
gone.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Oh.
I just said thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Bye.